What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Layla, and as you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about being a microbiologist. And this video has been requested multiple times by a number of people. It's no secret here that I am a microbiologist by day. I have shown a few clips throughout my vlogs, but I'm really not able to film much of my work. But I do know a lot of people have questions about becoming a microbiologist, or they are in school or going to school to become a microbiologist or in the science field. So I figured I would make this if it's going to help even just one of you, because it's not an everyday career path and it's not that straightforward. For those of you who wanted this, hopefully this is helpful to you, but if I don't answer any of your questions, please ask them down below and I will definitely get back to you. If you're looking for specific things about becoming a microbiologist, I'm gonna put some time points down in the description box, so check out those. And let's just jump right into it. I have a whole page and a half of notes here and we have a lot to run through, so I'm gonna try to make this as quick as possible. The first thing we're gonna cover is what I do, what I am considered, my title. So I am a microbiologist, more specifically an environmental microbiologist with a focus in public health, I guess you could say. If you do want to become a microbiologist, you could go into several different fields. So there is research environmentally, which is like what I do. You could go the academia route and become a teacher or do research through a university. You could work at a clinical lab. You could work in food or safety or pharmaceuticals. And then each of those areas would have their own things that you could work on within it. So for example, I currently work with bacteriophage, which is a virus that infects bacteria. So obviously I am working with bacteria and a virus. When I was in grad school, I worked with a fungi. If you go more into the public health side of things, you know, there's things like HIV and AIDS, antibiotic resistance, even more so, influenza, outbreak. There's all these different areas of research in all different things. I don't know that much outside of what I do. Like, I don't know much about clinical research. I don't know much about pharmaceuticals. You know, there's different areas. You may go into something more like industry, which would be more food or safety or something of that nature, but I honestly don't know much about that. I am an environmental microbiologist and I work with bacteriophage, which is a virus primarily. For a little bit of background info as to how I got into this job, I actually went into my undergrad thinking I wanted to be a dentist or an orthodontist. So I was pre-dental and I went through my first 3 years of undergrad thinking I wanted to be a dentist or an orthodontist. So by the third year, I changed my mind and I was 3 years in and I was doing pretty good, and I obviously did not want to change my major. So I had to think of something else, and I knew I liked the environment, so I went more the environmental route, which is why I ended up going into research, and then I joined a lab, and that is how I ended up in this job several years later. So my undergraduate degree was in biology, and then automatically I had a minor in chemistry, but that doesn't really affect anything. I did not choose that. That was just like automatic with the university. I went to Georgia State University, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm sure there are some microbiologist positions out there for someone with just a bachelor's, but I am honestly not sure. I continued on. Straight after my undergrad, I went into my master's, again majoring in biology, and then I had a concentration in environmental microbiology. It was actually applied in environmental microbiology, which was just, I don't know, annoying to say, but that doesn't show anywhere on my master's degree diploma. That was just within the system at Georgia State University. That was my concentration, and so I had more of a focus on that throughout college. But the very first time I took microbiology was during my undergrad, just general microbiology. I honestly wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I just kind of went with the flow of things because this opportunity kind of just presented itself. So I was in a research lab in my undergrad, and I joined that by reaching out to multiple research professors. So these are people who are lab PIs, or they have a lab that they lead, and then they have students who do research in there, and that could be undergrad students, that could be master's students, or PhD students. And so I emailed multiple professors. They all worked in environmental microbiology, and I didn't really know the specifics of what each of them did, so I just emailed them all. And of all those professors, only one ended up responding back to me. So that is how I got into that lab, and I met with the other people of that lab, and I worked under a master's student for a while. I worked under a PhD student for some time. I was really assisting people while I learned about research and the ins and outs of it. And then I took my GRE, did well on that, whatever, applied for the master's program, and I got in. I basically knew I would get accepted because of the research I already was doing. And with this master's program, I was able to finish in a year and a half. My tuition was paid for because I was teaching a microbiology lab every single semester, and then I was also doing research. By the end of my time as a graduate student, I wrote a research report, which I had to write, of the work that I was doing. And like I said, I was working on fungi. The report was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life, but now that paper is published and I am the first author of that. So that kind of helps you with your microbiology career in and of itself. So that's my background on it. I kind of want to steer away from my specific experience and just talk about the requirements while you're in school. So what I would suggest while you are in your undergrad or in grad school is to maintain your GPA. This of course goes for any degree because I think that's important. One, to maintain any scholarships that you may have, but also because science is a pretty difficult field and you need to study a lot, especially biology. Biology is definitely more difficult. I know some people get it easier than others. For me, it's a lot of remembering things. Each class kind of stacked on each other, or the stuff that you learned years before was still relevant years later, from my undergrad to grad school. And having to remember, certain cycles and things like that was really important, but very difficult for me. So I think it's important to get a good study group, or at least learn how to study really well on your own. Study groups really helped me, especially during my undergrad, for classes that I was a little bit weaker in. There's also a heavy focus on all the sciences, but chemistry. So you're gonna have to take general chemistry, you're gonna have to take organic chemistry 1 and 2, and biochemistry, and those are pretty difficult for a lot of people. So study groups were amazing while I was going through those classes. You've really got to dedicate a lot of time. So I was working throughout most of my college career, but outside of that, it was just, I had a lot of studying to do. If you want to become a microbiologist, I highly suggest gaining experience in research. Becoming a microbiologist without experience from school is, in my opinion, damn near impossible from what I've heard from other people. And this can come from joining a research lab. Like I mentioned with my story, you can email professors, or maybe you know a friend, or if you're interested in a different school or a different program, look out for those. I did not know you could get like an internship at the place where I work now, which is a huge opportunity if you can get an internship there. There are different hospitals you could work at if you're interested in the clinical side. They even have other forms of research that you could look into. Definitely try to gain experience. Like, I don't think you could just go through your undergrad and master's degree with a science education and then become a research scientist, because there's a lot of hands-on experience with that, and you definitely will probably need experience. So network with professors, talk to professors, see if they can, at least shadow in the lab, get your hands in the lab, and that should help you a ton with your career and with learning stuff that's going to be relevant when you actually start your career. I also suggest finding a good mentor when it comes to science, or just getting through grad school, especially because from my experience, I did not have very good mentors initially. At least I did not enjoy working under the people that I was working under. However, my lab PI. He was kind of my lab PI, but not exactly, but I consider him my PI. He was awesome, and he helped me out so much and encouraged me through a lot of it and helped me with my project a ton. Even though I got to work on my own, I could, consult with him about what I needed to do going forward and get his feedback on everything. And he was such a good mentor on guiding me through which classes to take. There were other people that I was able to talk to who had already been through the experience, and they could tell me professors to take or classes to take. Helps me study, helped me write, helped me do analytics when I was writing my paper. Like, there's so many things that other people helped me get through, especially in grad school. So definitely find a good mentor, find people that are above you who have been through the experience, and learn from them. There's so much that you can be exposed to while in the lab, so try to gain as much knowledge as possible that you think will be relevant to something that you want to do. And if you don't like what you're doing in the lab, then it's best to start earlier in your undergrad and just start working around with different things. One, so you can gain experience with different things, but also to see what you actually want to do as a career. Briefly, I'm going to cover the salary of a microbiologist. Obviously, this is more so focused in the United States. I'm not sure what the pay is overseas or in any other country, but for the United States, I would say the range, I'm not sure about like with a bachelor's or anything like that, but I would imagine probably about $40,000 to mid 100s, like 150,000. And that is like after years of experience or like working your way to the top in certain industries. Honestly, I don't really know. But I think even a smaller average would probably be like 50 to 80,000. And I fall within that as somebody with a master's. And then with this job, if I had my PhD, I would have a higher pay, but obviously that's not the case. So it can make a pretty big difference from having your master's versus your PhD salary wise, but I don't think that you need to get your PhD, but that could definitely help. The good thing though is that after you get your master's, you can at least start a career and go and get your PhD later if you really wanted to. But those numbers, otherwise, I know what I get paid obviously, but I just googled microbiologist salary, and that should give you a pretty rough estimate of what a microbiologist would get paid, and then you could look by where you live and all of that. I wanted to talk on the day-to-day, what it's like being a microbiologist. I mean, you guys if you watch my vlogs, then you can see kind of how my days are structured. I don't really get to film much at work, so I'll touch on that. With dressing, for where I work, I can dress casually. So I can wear jeans, I can wear really any type of shoe that I want to. They just need to be closed-toed shoes if you're going to be working in the lab. So I always am wearing closed-toed shoes. I'm always wearing long pants. You can't wear shorts or a skirt or something in the lab. And then you of course have to tie your hair back. General PPE when you're in the lab. I know when I was in grad school, I did not, we probably had to, but I didn't wear safety glasses. But looking back, I think it is important just always. So when I'm in the lab, always general PPE, which is personal protective equipment. So hair tied back, lab coat is on, gloves are on, and closed-toed shoes, safety glasses are on. Yeah, that's pretty standard. I work in a BS2 lab, biosafety 2, so the numbers will increase the more dangerous a lab is. So like a BS4 would be like Ebola or Zika virus, something more serious or dangerous to work with. So my stuff is just pretty general. So for me, I just have to wash my hands after I take my PPE off. So where I work, I do have an office. I share my office with somebody else. And so I have my own computer. I also have a laptop that goes with it that I could take home if I needed to. If I don't have much lab work, I will be in the office, but I don't prefer it. The lab is more fun and just more hands-on, obviously, so I'd rather be doing research than at the computer. I do work general hours, so where I work, it seems like most people get to choose the hours that they work. For me personally, I don't have to clock in, I don't have to clock out. I have an awesome boss, and I was allowed to choose which hours I work, so I choose around 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. And that is because I prefer to work earlier, leave earlier, and also avoid traffic. I'm not sure how other places, but that's pretty typical from what I can see. Obviously, I only work Monday through Friday. I know there are some people who have to go in on the weekends. I know when I was doing research at Georgia State that I would have to go in on the weekends, like every single weekend, because I had to take photos of my experiment every 3 days, every 4 days, it just depended. And so I always had to go there on the weekends. And that may be the case in the future for me at this current job, just to do something really quick on the weekend. There are some people I work with that come in to count plates or to do something on the weekend, but that's not typical. So it's typically Monday through Friday, and for me, 7 to 3. However, there are some days, and if you watch my vlogs, you would know this, there are some days where I spend a lot more time there. Some days I leave earlier. There's typically one day of the week for me that I have like a 10-hour shift there because the experiment takes that long. It just depends. And sometimes there's extra sampling or something like that that is taking longer, so we will stay a bit longer. But that's kind of expected, and the hours are pretty flexible otherwise. I will say being a microbiologist is very slow paced. Maybe not in certain areas, like if there's an outbreak of something, it's gonna be really busy and kind of stressful for a little bit. But for me and what I do, it's pretty laid back and it's pretty slow. So for example, Mondays are probably one of the slowest days, and Fridays, because you can't do much on a Monday as a scientist because you have to plate your cells and allow them to grow for at least a day, because you can't leave them over the weekend because the cells are not fresh enough to use. I mean, ideally you don't want to do that. So typically on Monday is just computer work, preparing for the week. Sometimes we have meetings. For me, we have maybe 2 meetings, 3 meetings a month, and those are typically just like updates that we tell each other about our research. It's like admin stuff. The admin people talk to us about just things going on. People typically present at those meetings. Yeah, it's definitely not that horrible. Sometimes I'll have phone calls like with my boss and somebody else, or I'll meet with somebody else that is relevant to my work, but it just depends. Like, they're not horrible, awful meetings every single week, which I'm so grateful for because I personally hate meetings. So there's only a couple of meetings for me. Sometimes I have to do certain trainings. I know like the onboarding training was pretty extensive. It was all like online stuff, and then throughout the year, sometimes we have to do refreshers, sometimes we have to attend things to get training, just depending on, you know, safety or research practices, things like that. So pretty basic when it comes to that. But overall, there is lots of waiting with science. So typically we have to like set something up and then allow it to grow or shake or incubate, whatever, for several hours. And then you got to do some work in the lab and then let it sit some more, or, you know, it's just different for depending on what you're doing. But for me, there is a lot of downtime, which can make the day go a little bit slower, but you know, I'm pretty grateful for that. So yeah. Okay, now the skills that you need to be a microbiologist. I wrote a list of skills, and I think these are really important. So the first one is going to be patience, because experiments are frustrating and there's going to be a lot of failures. There's going to be a lot of slow time, like I said, so you really have to be patient with your research and everything that's going to come with it, because there's a lot of problems and a lot of setbacks. Attention to detail, very detail oriented, which I think this is right up my alley when it comes to that. Like, you really have to pay attention to exactly what you're doing and, you know, write things down and be very specific with what you're doing. You can't really like slack off for certain things. You know, once you start doing tasks, they become not habit, but you just kind of can do them on autopilot. And I've gotten to that point for some things, but there have been times where, you know, like diluting tubes or something, diluting a sample, and I'm like, did I dilute that? Like, you can't always remember, and you had already plated it. So you have to really pay attention to what you're doing, making sure that what you're plating is actually what's in the tube. Make sure it's written correctly on your plate, or, you know, it just depends on what you're doing, but you have to be very accurate with what you're doing. Obviously, you need some skills in the sciences, biology, chemistry, a little bit of physics. You also want to get comfortable with some math because we use math pretty frequently, but nothing like crazy. Definitely not the quadratic formula that they teach you. The ability to work on a team and as an individual. So for me, I'm lucky in that my boss kind of, I have a specific project to work on, but I can kind of take things in my own direction. And I have to figure out how to do that, as an individual, but mostly I'd get to work with my team or at least discuss things with the people that I work with, and that helps a ton. And there's a lot of times where you sometimes have to help people with sampling if there's a big sampling day or something like that, and people do things differently, so you have to be able to listen to what they would like if it's their project, or just be a part of the team to really make things a lot easier. So both of those are important, teamwork and individual work. With my job, I definitely don't expect my boss to tell me what's next. Like, if that is your thing, you probably, maybe there's certain fields of my microbiology that you could do that. Like, your next step is this, and then this, and then this, but that's not the case at all. Like, it's not step by step. You kind of just figure the things out as you go, make changes, do it again, figure things out, report it to your boss, and then, you kind of just I tell him where I'm going next. And obviously he gives his feedback and thoughts on the topic, but I kind of have to design the structure of everything. You're gonna want to learn analytics, so this can be on multiple platforms, on the computer. I know in grad school, really, I think I just use Excel, but at my current job, we use more complex things, I guess, like Sigma plot, and honestly, I don't know. Analytics is not my strong point, but it's something that comes up over and over again because you have to put your data into a sheet and make graphs and all those things in order to write a paper and present your data. You got to get good at writing because you probably will want to write a scientific paper because that is one way of showing that that's showing your work, and how you can get further along in your career is by having authorship of a publication in various scientific journals. You also want to be able to read scientific papers. This is another weakness of mine because honestly, that's the worst part, is reading scientific papers. I think it takes a while to grasp the art of reading a scientific paper and understanding it quickly, because people use different languages, like science languages, and just being able to understand a paper is a big thing, but you are going to have to refer to papers in your writing, refer to papers before you do research, read papers to educate yourself on certain things. So definitely practice reading scientific articles from all different areas of science. You're gonna need some molecular experience as well, and this was hard for me because I don't really like molecular sciences. I don't think it's like PCR and those things just don't appeal to me. I never liked those in college. I didn't do well in those classes. Like, I did fine, but just it's not my forte, So you do definitely have to learn some molecular techniques, and at least for me, that was very obvious, and you should anyway because you are a scientist and that is involved in a lot of things. You need to be able to solve problems because things are going to come up. You got to think logically, like, why is this happening? What's the next step? What do we need to change? What went wrong? If something did go wrong, there's all these things that are going to come up. It's kind of just like you do your experiment, you observe the results, and then you make changes as you need to. So you have to be able to think through those things and figure them out as you're doing them and after you do them. You definitely have to be observant and organize your thoughts into a lab notebook. I know in grad school I wasn't very good at recording my work in my lab notebook, but since I got to this job, I write down everything. This is important, one, so you know what you're doing and you can refer back to it and repeat the process, but also for you to write your paper, something to hold you accountable so that you have proof of your work, you have your results in your notebook, and then of course, this notebook is not something that I would end up taking with me. This would stay at my job for future people to work with if necessary. I've gotten to look at previous employees' notebooks so that I can see how they did something and how things went for them, their results, which is pretty cool. So I can, they have a table of contents, very organized, so I can find the exact page. So you do want to be really organized with your lab notebook and get into the habit of writing things down. And if you're in school anyway, you should be taking really good notes while you're in class, especially for those science classes. So get into the habit of taking good notes in the classroom and in the lab. Just in general, keep writing things down. I think I already kind of touched on this, but definitely get used to failure, because that's one of the most frustrating things about it. There's issues like contamination that come up. I have dealt with that both in grad school and at my job, which is frustrating. There are times that you may mess up something, so you either have to start over completely that same day, or maybe even the next week or the next day, whatever, because science is picky, it's finicky for certain things, so you have to be on your A game, and you're gonna mess up though, because you are human. So you gotta get used to that, being very patient. And communication is another one. So you're gonna have to be able to communicate your work to other people, especially your team members and your boss, and have an understanding of it, but also you want to be able to present your work. And so that is one thing I'm really excited about getting better at, is presenting. I've always had a fear of presenting, but luckily, like I said, I used to teach a class during grad school, and so that kind of helped me become a little bit of a better speaker. But this job, I'm expecting to present more, obviously it's a more professional experience, and I can present my science. And it's actually kind of exciting, because it's, you are the expert on that, and I think it's exciting and cool to be able to show my work and what I've been doing during my time. You're also going to learn about a lot of equipment. This is probably something you would learn more if you are in actual research in a lab. So there's going to be specialized equipment that is typically really, really expensive, and you want to know how to work it properly. So you're going to have to get used to that, and then learn other ones as well if you get the chance to. It just depends on what you do, but you're going to want to be really careful with those. Of course, you're going to want to know the basics of microbiology, working in a lab. So this is going to be aseptic technique, how to pipette, how to dilute, how to plate, how to do a spread plate versus a lawn, all these different things. Those are just kind of the basics that you would probably learn in a standard lab, and microscope work, things like that. But I didn't have that much experience, to be honest, before coming to research. So I did a lot of my learning, and I made a lot of mistakes during my first semester as a research student. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I know this video is so long. The final thing I wanted to touch on are the pros and cons. And these are I'm gonna run through these real quick. These are what I could think of the top of my head last night. So the pros: being a scientist is definitely pretty fun, and it's pretty cool work. It's definitely unique, and not a lot of people know what you are doing, which is pretty cool. And I just think I have learned so much, and I think everything is really exciting and amazing that I get exposed to. Like, this tiny little virus has the ability to infect this tiny little bacteria. Like, you can't even see them, and then these bacteria are able to take over our body, and we can have these viruses in our body, but they don't harm us. Like, it's just incredible, and it's pretty cool to do microbiology. You can definitely help people. Your work will probably have an impact on public health, or on people, on diseases, on the environment, whatever, which is pretty cool. And I know that means a lot more to some other people. There is so much room to grow, and I can learn about different equipment. I can learn about different papers, different areas of study. Like, there's been so much I've learned in just these. I haven't even been at my job for 2 years, and I've learned so much. So there's so much room for growth. You could get training on different things. You could work with different people. Like, I know that's an option where I could at least just observe people if I really wanted to. The more you expose yourself to papers or presentations, like, there's so much room for growth, and that can help you in your career later on in life, and help you get to where you truly want to be. For me, it's a pretty chill environment. I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but I don't have to deal with any sort of customers. You know, I don't have to clock in and out of work. Like, I know that's not for everybody, but I think that's pretty, I don't have to be there at a certain time. Like, it's kind of just, they trust me to be there and do my work, and I appreciate that. It's just, yeah, I hate dealing with customers because my previous job, I worked the front desk at an urgent care, which is not the friendliest of people. I have been a waitress before. I've had to deal with people before, and it just sucks. And I'm sorry if you have to deal with that now, but you know, you still get to work with people. You still have your coworkers and stuff. So you have to deal with some people that are like annoying or rude or whatever. But it really doesn't matter at the end of the day because I don't have to make phone calls. I don't have to answer phone calls. I don't have to talk to people or serve people, anything of that. My income does not matter on other people, and I will not get yelled at by people for having to wait for too long. Like, yeah, this is easily the best job I've ever had, and I'm super grateful for it. And there's also room for creativity. You know, I think it's pretty cool that I can incorporate certain things. Like, there's a little bit of imagination with things, especially with my team members, and how like we just talk about things and go off on tangents or make jokes about things, and it's just a lot of fun. There's also creativity with your project. Like, for example, if you go back in some of my vlogs, you'll see my setup of work, and we literally use a drill and, you know, drill bits to make these little contraptions and pieces and different chambers for what we're doing, and I think that's pretty cool that we even can do that. And those are definitely some of my favorite parts because I am a naturally creative person. So I like to, you know, use my brain in different ways, not just on science. So there's definitely a lot of room for creativity. And those are the main pros that I can think of. I'm sure there's some more. The cons, I would say, you know, it's potentially a dangerous job, but I would say almost every job has its dangers. But, you know, you're exposing yourself to different microbes, fire, blades, needles, chemicals. There's like a couple of chemicals that I work with that have really strong odors, and honestly, I don't know the long-term effect of that, so I'm gonna start wearing a mask. I think I need to order some, but yeah, there are some potential dangers, so you obviously have to be careful, and you get trained on that, you know, if there's a spill or if there's a fire or something like that. But that's why you also have to be really careful because you don't want to cause any issues, but sometimes things just happen. It's definitely very slow, like I said, which can be a problem for a lot of people, but you know, it can be a pro and a con. It's a con because it sometimes makes the day feel longer. It drags the day out or the week out. But when I think of working the urgent care during the busiest flu season, like of the decade, then like I don't care. You know, there were days as an urgent care front desk clerk that I would not sit down for 12 hours, and I literally would cry on the way home from being so stressed out from that job. So I'll take slow any day over something like that. There's definitely a lot of problems. Like I said, there could be contamination or you mess something up. Lots of failures to get used to, but I think that kind of builds you up as a person. So all these cons kind of have like an upside to them too. So you can definitely grow as a person and become stronger and more confident in your ability to do certain things. There's definitely a lack of control. You can't always control what happens with your experiment, you know. Sometimes the results go one way, the next time they go the next way, and sometimes they don't make sense. You do everything normally, but bacteria and viruses and all those things have a mind of their own, so you just never know day to day. So you can't control everything. You can only control what you are actually working on. Another con is you may not end up with a good team or a good boss, and that is so unfortunate to me because I think I don't know. I know I got so lucky to be under who I am under and working with who I'm working with, and I am so grateful for that because I've heard horror stories of other people, and I just think that's a shame that people have to even deal with that as a scientist, especially in public health. But you know, not everybody ends up as lucky as I do, unfortunately. So if you have a bad mentor, that's not something that you should necessarily tolerate. Like don't feel stuck in that position, especially if you're in school and you don't like your mentor that you're working under for the semester or something. Like, just get out of there and move on to somebody else, because there have been people that I've worked under that just, you know, rub you the wrong way, and I don't respect that about people. So if you can, try to get under somebody else. But when you start your career and you are under somebody, I know that can be a little bit of a different situation. So just be aware that your situation may not be exactly like mine, where you like really like your boss and really like your coworkers. There's lots of scientific reading and scientific writing, which to me is a con, because I don't like scientific reading or scientific writing. I love writing in general, and I love reading personal development books, but when it comes to science, I'm sorry, that's not something I probably will ever enjoy. I am excited about getting papers published. My goal is to publish like probably 2 papers during my time in my current position. So I am excited about that, because I want to get that work out, and I want to, you know, for my boss and for my coworkers, that is something that I would like to do, but I don't love it. So that is one con. Some people like that and they don't care, so that may be my opinion. And the final thing is that it can be hard to find a job. I probably shouldn't have saved this for last. I should have mentioned it earlier, but I applied for various positions at my current job, which is a huge company. And, you know, there's different contractors within it and different fellowships within it. And I applied for probably 60 plus positions just at this job. And then I applied to probably 20 or 30 other science related jobs and heard nothing. I got one interview. It was actually at a children's hospital, and so I didn't really have that much experience with it. I think I would have been more in like phlebotomy. I got to see how it worked. It was pretty cool. Like, they would send a blood sample down or cell sample down, and they would immediately test it, because it was like a hospital for cancer patients. I'm actually glad I didn't get that job, because seeing the way they worked, I don't think it would have been the best thing for me. But that is the only interview I got, and obviously I did not get that job. And the reason that I found out about it was I knew somebody who worked there, and I had worked with him in grad school and undergrad, and so that was kind of my foot in the door. So I was able to apply for the job, and then I had a reference or a recommendation from somebody, and now he is one of my team members, or whatever you want to call it. So for me, and for a lot of people, I think it's very important for you to know people. Like, that might be for all jobs these days, but especially for where I work, that's a big thing. Like, I know that I helped somebody get a job about a year into my time there, and like, he probably wouldn't have ever found out about that job had it not been for me emailing him. So you definitely have to know people, at least for where I work, but I'm not sure how it works for other places. I just know that I could not find a job in the science field for like a good year out of graduation. Yeah, nothing. So I had a high GPA, I had experience, all that stuff, but could not find a job. So just keep that in mind, and, you know, really network and connect with people if you're interested in becoming a microbiologist. Okay, that was literally so long. The sun is setting, and the sun was not setting before, so I'm sorry if that was way too long, but hopefully I touched on everything. I really wanted to cover all the details, and I think that I covered everything I could possibly think of. But if you have any questions, like I said, comment them down below and I will answer them in the comments. I wish I could show you guys my work in more detail, but unfortunately I cannot film too much of what I do, but I will try to get clips, you know, in my vlogs if I can. So keep on watching those. But that is the gist of becoming a microbiologist and, you know, my experience with it and everything that I have learned thus far. If you are in school trying to become a microbiologist, I wish you the best of luck. Feel free to ask me any questions if you would like to. I think it's a pretty good job. I think there is, you know, I think it is growing. The field is growing, and there will definitely be a continued need for microbiologists, at least definitely here in the United States. So keep at it and keep gaining new skills. So with that, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you in my next video.